Hi everyone. I'm going to hopefully answer a couple of questions for you on this JK-LS swap. It's somewhat dark here in the shop, so I hope all of you can see what we're looking at. This is the 6.2 liter LS3. You will note it has a 3-inch exhaust all the way back. These downpipes are 2 1/4 inches, and that's because that's what General Motors used on the LS3. A lot of questions about the transfer case, and I'm going to try to answer those. This is a new process or new venture gear 241C Chevrolet. We were going to put an Atlas in this Rubicon, but they're not available, at least for another 8 weeks. So we're going to run this 241C temporarily. It does bolt right in onto the 6L80. That's the factory adapter there. We added a slip yoke eliminator from JB Conversions. That's a 1350 CV drive shaft. We also replaced the rear Dana 44 flange with a stronger flange. As far as the rear suspension goes, there's no modifications. We're going to replace the axles in this one with some stronger axles and beef it up a little. Here, I hope you can see the little sensor right there. That's a fuel tank pressure sensor. General Motors runs a somewhat more sophisticated evaporative emission system than Chrysler, and they actually monitor the fuel tank pressure. I don't know if any of you have smelt fuel in your JKs when it's really hot out, but Chrysler basically runs a blow-off vent that's based on pressure. Chevrolet's a little more sophisticated. They run that fuel tank pressure sensor and this canister vent solenoid. Now, we have just mounted this temporarily because we're going to relocate this evap canister, but essentially when fuel tank pressure builds up, even if the car is off and you're not in it, this solenoid remains hot, and it will vent based on fuel tank pressure, which is very, very rare because it has a purge valve which maintains the fuel tank pressure to where they want it to be. But that sensor and this valve are added. In this JK we have the stock Chrysler canister, which we found works fine. You'll see in a minute on the other JK we swapped it out for a Silverado canister. Coming forward, this is the 6.2 liter LS. You can tell this is a Rubicon. We got our disconnecting sway bar. All that remains intact and stock. Here's our LS engine mounts. They are hydraulic, liquid filled. Air compressor. That's the original JK lower radiator hose. That is an aluminum Griffin radiator made for us specifically for the JK. This JK does not have its transmission cooler in yet. We're going to install that. If you look at the front suspension, nothing has been modified. It's all stock Rubicon, right down to the clips that hold the ABS sensor wires on. We have to replace the front flange on this Dana 44 to upgrade it. One of the reasons this Rubicon's not in the road is we're waiting for parts. General Motors is on national back order on these 6L80 shifter levers, so we're going to essentially end up making one. You'll see here we're running a manual oil pressure sensor for the Chrysler dash, NOx sensor, O2 sensors front and rear. These are CARB certified catalytic converters. We come up front. This connector here is for your variable valve timing solenoid and cam sensor. You can see our air compressors in the stock location, and by the way, we do run the original air conditioning hoses. One of the goals of this kit was to make it affordable and have you use as many of your original components as possible, and reusing all of your accessories, your alternator, your power steering pump, your air conditioning compressor, your radiator hoses, your air conditioning hoses. Saves you a lot of money. And that's really what the small block Chevy swap has been through the years. It's to keep it affordable. And we've thrived to do that. Other than that, it's all stock Rubicon. Now let's step over here to this 5.3 liter. You will see this is the original 3.8 liter exhaust, the original 241J transfer case, original drive shafts in the rear and in the front, transfer case, shifter bracket. This is the canister that we originally swapped out from the Silverado, but determined that it was not necessary. There's your vent solenoid, mounted a little bit higher out of the way. And if you can see it, there's your fuel tank pressure solenoid, or sensor. You see we have our stock drive shaft, stock Dana 30, stock radiator. This radiator has not been replaced. These are liquid-filled hydraulic mounts with an earlier style of our frame mounts. They've got a lot of miles on these. These are 3/16 steel rather than the 1/4 inch the newer ones are. You can see there's plenty of room for our downpipes. These are California certified catalytic converters. This motor has air-fuel management, 4-cylinder mode. It does not have variable valve timing. Same setup on our air conditioner, power steering pump, alternator. And that's about it. These LS motors leave a lot of room, as you can see, between the firewall and the engine. There's no reason to move the battery. There's no reason to hammer on the firewall. We don't relocate the steering shaft. Really the only cutting and welding is to install these engine mounts. We do thrive to make all these conversions certifiable emissions wise. So they all do run upstream and downstream O2 sensors. We have our own shifter bracket, which allows you to use the original JK shifter. It goes from park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then M, which stands for manual. And in the manual mode, you can choose any gear from 1st to 6th. And then you can, of course, put it back into drive, and you're in a full automatic mode. This adapter we talked about, it's kind of hard to see, but this does mate the 6L80 to the stock 241J. While we're talking about that, I've had a lot of questions why you can't use the Rubicon OR transfer casing. Let me hopefully show you. This is a 241 OR out of a Rubicon, and you might be able to see the splines in the input shaft. This happens to be the small input planetary, which is used on the 4L60, the Turbo 350s. The 6L80 uses the shaft out of the Turbo 400, the larger one. This is a planetary gear out of a 241 with the small. Let me see if I can move this over for you. Alright, we're back. This is the planetary out of a 241, and you can see how much larger the planetary and this OR is. They both have small splines. This is the larger spline, Turbo 400 shaft. This happens to be out of an older Cadillac, but let me see if I can demonstrate how much larger it is. Using this wrench, if I drop it in you can see it barely fits where in the Turbo 400, much larger, at least a quarter of an inch larger. Problem is they don't make a OR with a larger splined planetary input gear, so we're pretty much stuck running it with a smaller input gear, which means we can use the other transmissions but not the 6L80. Maybe in the future someone will make an input gear for the small planetary or the large planetary. We'll hopefully have this Rubicon on the road in the next couple of days and take you for a test drive. Thanks for watching again.